What is up, everybody? Star Wars Dad back for another video. Today we're going to be doing the third part of our series on Control, and this video is on how to beat Control. So what I'm going to be doing is a little different. I'm going to take a look at 3 different decks that are aggressive, and just to kind of give you an idea, especially, I know that the card supply is really expensive right now, so a lot of people are don't want to spend $400 on one of these competitive decks with 3 Avengers and 3 Laser Blasts and 3 Darth Vaders and all that kind of stuff. It adds up so quickly. I mean, Darth Vader's what, $60 a pop, so you're spending $180 just to have a playset, which is ridiculous. The Laser Blasts, I think, are like 20 each. Avengers like 20 to 30 each. I mean, that's a lot of money just from those 9 cards. So a lot of people are like, I want to be competitive, but I need like decks that are affordable. So then they go to like this deck, which is still expensive because Poe is like $40 a pop, and Wreckers, what, $5 each. So you're looking at already there like $150, close to that. But that's at least a lot more reasonable than 400 plus. But anyway, so we're going to be looking at 3 different decks and just kind of talking about in general how to beat control decks and kind of my take on that. So one of the things that I want to talk about first is kind of just my own experience with card games. So let's talk about Magic, because I started Magic, I don't know, probably like in 2014. Started playing it like periodically, playing Commander. I don't know if you're not familiar with Commander. It's like Twin Suns is like the version of Star Wars' version of Commander, which I can't wait for it to become more popular and we get to 80 cards. And actually, I will be doing a Twin Suns deck list of a Iden Boba deck, which is really sweet. I'll be doing that soon. So if you're interested in Twin Suns content or want more Twin Suns content, let me know, because I have another really good idea for a Twin Suns deck that I'll be posting as well soon. But so when I first started playing Magic, the easiest way to learn a card game is to play aggro. So like right now, the easiest thing to do is play Sabine. Like these decks aren't like, Sabine is a little more complicated than an aggro deck in Magic, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree. But, you're not just hoping to draw cards and trying to push damage. Like you have a little more thinking. There's more thought processes. So I do enjoy like Sabine Green more than I enjoyed aggro in Magic, where Magic was just like, aggro was kind of like the deck that players who either just like to win the game in 3 minutes, or they're new to the game, or maybe they don't have time to invest in getting better at the game, like with decks that are more complicated or complex, or mid-range or combo decks or control decks. Either way, though, aggro was not a deck I enjoyed in Magic. It was just very simple. Like, so when I first started, I played this deck that was called Gruul Aggro, and I enjoyed it because it was different than what I had played in any other game at that point. Where basically, kind of like how Wing Leader pumps up your units, you had units that would pump up other units occasionally. You could decide to pump up your own unit, or you could decide to attack in with it immediately when you played it, which is really cool. And I'm sure they'll have some kind of mechanic similar to that in here at a certain point. But it was a deck I played pretty competitively. I got to day 2 in a tournament with it, because they had online tournaments. As many of you know, I can't really play in person right now. So once this game has online tournaments, I will definitely be playing in online tournaments whenever I'm able to. But so I played that deck for a long time, and I think I played against one of my buddies, and he was more of a control player, and I had never played control at that point. And I was playing Gruul Aggro, and I was pretty good at it. Like I had already gotten, I think, to day 2 with that deck, so I was doing well. I played card games now for like 30 plus years, so it's not like I was new to card games. I've been playing them since I was a kid. But when I was playing against his control deck, I would get to a certain point, and it would be like the equivalent of like 20 damage in Star Wars Unlimited, perhaps. But I would get to that point, and then he would just start drawing all these cards and just wiping the board, and he would just start gaining life, and then he would just play these really big, powerful units that gain life, and then just, and he'd have that alongside a piece of removal, and it was just like, I had no chance. And he would just start taking over the game. He'd be gaining like 5 life a turn, doing 5 damage to my base, and I was just like, man, this is really, this is really hard. So I tried out his control deck. He sent it to me, and I tried it out, and I could not do the same things that he was doing. I was struggling, and was losing to the same deck, which was the Gruul aggro deck that I tried to play against it, and other aggro decks, and I was just like, how is he doing this? So I kind of just like didn't play with it for a while. And eventually I came across another deck where you played more aggressively, where you just like pump up one of your units, and you used a lot of like protection spells so that they couldn't kill your unit. Kind of like the equivalent of like Lurking TIE Phantom, where it's hard to kill it, and you pump it up and you make it really strong, and then your opponent doesn't have anything to kill it, and then they just win the game. So I played a deck like that, but it was like a deck that had blue in it, with Lurking TIE Phantom, which I do think is an interesting concept for this game. But basically, the blue cards in Magic would counter any spells that you tried to play to kill those big units. So I started getting a feel for what it was like to play blue cards, which are the control color of Magic. And I was attacking with these big units, and I remember actually playing that deck and having a ton of success. And actually, it was like the best deck I'd ever played. It was just like, power up your units, protect your units, and control just had a terrible matchup versus it. But I was also playing some control elements, and I was like starting to learn how to use those cards correctly, play them at the right time, draw cards, and I was starting to see the value of drawing cards and counter spells and like protecting my units, and also playing at a different pace. Where the Gruul aggro deck, I was just like, I'm going to play all my units and just try to hit them in the face and punch them in the mouth, and that wasn't working. And so I started to like really like the idea of what a control deck can do, and like how you start to become, and that's why they call it control, because you're controlling the board state. The board state, you are dictating what's allowed to be on the board at a certain point. When you've turned the corner or climb the peak in a control deck, you are starting to dictate what happens. And I really started to enjoy that, because it was a much more complex way of playing a card game. When you're playing a control deck, what you're trying to do is survive. You're saying, when I look at this Iden blue list right now, and I'm matched up against Sabine, right? I'm trying to say, what's the best card I could find right now in this moment to deal with the board state that this Sabine player has, and what potential cards could they draw that would be really difficult for me. And if they do potentially play this one card, like a K2SO on 4 resources or a Darksaber on 4 resources, what is my best chance of having an answer for that card so that I can survive? Because if I get to a place where I get to the Iden flip turn and I'm under 20 damage, then I have a very good chance of winning the game. So it's like, the way I would describe it is, it's like solving a puzzle. So each game is a puzzle. It's a complex puzzle of trying to figure out, because you don't know what the other person has in their deck. When you first get matched up against them, you're just guessing on your knowledge of what the metagame is. They might have some spice in there. They might have some different takes on that deck. They might have, more space units than normal, or they might have, a bunch of heroic sacrifices in the main board. So I started to fall in love with how complex control can be. So I started to play control, and I ended up playing control for, I don't know, I think probably like 14-15 months straight is all I did, and I just got really, really good at control. But while I was getting really good at control, I really learned what control's weaknesses are, and how you beat a control deck, and the things that are hard for me. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So the first deck that we're going to be playing against today is Iden Blue, and we're going to be using the Han Wide deck. Let me show you real quick. right here. So this deck is a deck that recently just got first and second place at a tournament in Poland, and I think it also, I recently heard about it winning another store showdown or whatever they're called, not too long ago, maybe like a week ago. So this deck is going to gain a lot of traction. It's going to be a deck that, you know, starts to get a lot more attention, and you're going to see a lot more of this deck everywhere because it's, you know, it's a newer deck, and usually at the beginning of a new set, like newer decks like this, once they have some results, then a lot more people jump on the train because they see how this deck can perform and why it's good, and then they start to make their own takes on it. So this is a deck that's going to be very strong. This is a deck that is a very difficult for a control deck. I recently played against this deck in the Boba Blue video that I did, and it was a tough matchup. Like, I think I won like 30 to 26 or something. Like, it was really hard because they have so many cheap units, right? So I only have 3 board wipes in my deck, right, as a control player. I have lots of removal, but the removal is 3, 4, 6 cost, 4 cost with the Vigilance. You know, Rival's Fall is 6 cost, Power of the Dark Side's 3, Takedown's 4. So my removal is expensive. Their units are not as expensive. Like Maz Kanata, for example. You play Maz Kanata, then you play a Clone Deserter, you have a 2-2 and a 2-3, right? So next turn, if I play Power of the Dark Side, I can only kill one of those, and you're going to choose the one that you don't care about as much. You're going to choose probably Maz Kanata because you don't want me to draw cards with the Clone Deserter's Bounty. Or maybe you'll keep the Maz Kanata because you have 3 1-drops on your second turn, and you want Maz Kanata to be a 5/5. So, I mean, it really... So, like, Power of the Dark Side becomes way less effective when Maz Kanata is a 5/5. And then the following turn, if I don't have a takedown, Maz Kanata is going to be a 6/6 or a 7/7 even, and then I can't even kill that card anymore. Maybe if I have a Fell of the Dragon, but again, I have to have the right piece of removal at the right time. Maz Kanata, for example, can just get out of control against control decks. So how do they deal with it? So why this deck is good against a control deck, and how you use this deck is you go as wide as possible, you know, against control decks. And that's what you're doing early on. Like, you know what kind of removal they potentially have based on the leader and the color that you're playing against. So, like, if I'm playing against Iden Blue, like, I know that Iden Blue could potentially have an Entrenched. They could potentially have a Sentinel. They could play a Power of the Dark Side or make an opening on turn 2. So those are the cards that I'm playing with the knowledge that there's a good chance that they could have one of those. And how could it be, you know, affecting my decisions? The difference in this game, though, is of course that it's a, you know, an action game where they make an action, I make an action. So the control player, like, and one of the reasons why Dr. Pershing is so good is because it gives them the ability to draw a card and use an action to not do anything other than just draw a card. So it gives them the opportunity to see one more card, and then what you do on the board, they can make the best decision based on what their hand size is after they've seen that third card for the turn. So as an aggro player, or as a player who's trying to beat a control deck, I want to make that decision very difficult for them. I want to have a unit in space, a unit on ground, and then play another unit in space and another unit on ground on turn 2. So that there's just stuff everywhere, and I'm swarming the board with them having to make, you know, educated guesses, or like, what's a better way of saying it, like damage control. And then as they're doing that, I'm reacting to how they're trying to slow me down by putting more pressure on the area that's a weakness, right? And because I have units in space and units on the ground, then I have options of things to choose. And then Han's ability in a deck like this, I can cheat in more units. I don't care if they're damaged, because that doesn't matter. Control is just using removal spells anyways. They're not doing damage to my units typically, unless they're playing like a bunch of Sentinels, or they're playing like a red deck where they have damage removal. But, you know, sometimes even I don't cheat things in because these units are already cheap, and there's no point. Like, I can just play the units at full health and, you know, make their takedowns less effective, right? Another really important thing to think about, and I know I talked about this a little bit, but like, so it's really important to know what type of control you're playing against and the general cards. Like, again, like if you're playing a Vader Blue deck, you know that they have access to Force Choke, which is an immediate removal on turn 1. So if you're playing against Vader Blue, you, as best as you can, you want to avoid playing a unit on the ground, because if they have a force choke immediately to deal with your unit, which is very possible, then you're already set back a turn, which is a turn that you could be pushing damage on their face. So you typically want to have a good amount of space units, and decks that are heavy in space are another weakness for control. Because think about how most controls decks are played, like this one in particular, right? Like I have 3 Black Sun Starfighter and 2 System Patrol Craft, and then I have 3 Entrenched, and then 2 Inferno 4, right? So, but my version again is not the same as others. I play a little more space units and space sentinels because of my fear of that being a giant weakness. We also play make an opening, so it's a little more well-rounded in this list. But there are other lists that don't play as much. They'll just play Avenger, or they'll just play Inferno 4 and Avenger, or maybe just the Sunfighter. So that's more of a weakness for a control deck. So, building your deck in a way that is balanced, where you have like 9 to 15 space units, is another great way, because then you're able to arena dodge. You're able to play a space unit when they play a ground unit. They play a pike, and you're like, I don't care, I'm going to play a green A-wing, and then I'm going to play a wing leader, and then I'm pumping up and I'm swinging for 5 instead. So that's, you want to know what you're playing against. And again, the more you have tried out these control decks, the Iden blues, the Boba blues, even the Vader blues, the more you're going to understand what those decks' weaknesses are, how those decks are typically played, what those decks want to do, and what types of removal that they have early on, and what they're, how they typically want to play them. And that's like one of the things you can't really teach. It's more like the experience you have of playing the control deck, the Vader blue, the Iden blue, the Boba blue. Once you have the experience of playing those decks, you're like, oh, I know what they're trying to do here, because this is what I would do. And that's a different kind of knowledge, is that experiential knowledge of like actually playing the deck versus just hearing about the deck or reading about the deck. I mean, sometimes you can watch a video about somebody playing the deck and kind of get some ideas, but it's different still than playing it yourself. There's still just something additional knowledge that you get from playing it yourself. So if you want to beat a deck, the best thing to do is play the deck. So like if you're running into this Iden blue deck a lot and you're like, man, I hate that deck and I cannot beat it, play it yourself. And then you'll be like, that's how you beat it, because that's how I keep losing. So that'll, losing with a deck is the best way to learn how to beat a deck, if that makes sense. But yeah, so you really want to know what you're playing against and know what types of cards. And also playing a deck is another reason that you're going to have a better knowledge of what's in that deck, because you're like, yeah, I played Iden Blue. I know what's in there typically, and I know what cards they're looking for and what they're trying to find and what they need right now to beat me. If you know what the player needs to beat you, then you're able to play around it, with that knowledge to the best of your ability to increase your odds of avoiding that situation or playing around that situation. Like one of the hardest cards for Iden Blue to play against, besides like heavy space, is K2SO. K2SO is a very, very good card. Like if I'm an aggro player and I find a K2SO, I am never resourcing that against control, because I know that this is a card that no matter what is going to do 3 damage to their face just from getting on the board. And if they don't deal with it immediately, then I can swing in for damage. I can either go straight to their face for 4, or I can heroic sacrifice it for 9. So either way, I'm getting in for damage. And if it goes left, continues to be left unattended, then I'm just going to win the game, because there's no way. And like even if I know I'm playing into a board wipe, I don't care if I play a K2SO, because I'm still going to do 3 damage to their face. So, and if the best removal they have, if I have 3 units out as a Power of the Dark Side, I'm going to let my K2SO die and do 3 damage to their face, so that I get value out of that removal. So those are types of things that you understand, when you're playing a deck, is because you've played Iden Blue, you know that K2SO sucks to play against. So you're like, I am never resourcing this card when I find it. And I'll have 2 K2SOs or 3 K2SOs in my hand, I don't care, because that is an amazing card against them. And that's like one of the best cards I can find. For a Cause I Believe in is great too, because it sets up your draws and does 3 to 4 damage to their face. But it's not a card you want to play early, because again, you want to establish a consistent threat on the board that consistently puts damage to their face before you get to the place where you're playing cards that have reach to close out the game. So, again, if you have any questions about this stuff, or maybe you're like, how do I beat control with this deck? Please feel free to ask. I'm not going to sit here and go through every single deck and how to beat control with that deck. Some decks just shouldn't play against control. Like you don't want to play against control because control, like Boba Green, for example. Boba Green gets annihilated by this deck because they're not as aggressive as, you know, the Han Go Wide or the Sabine Green or the Kylo Reds. So I'm able to just remove things, and they're not, you know, ambushing in or overwhelming. So like they're not pushing damage with Boba the leader. So I'm able to just take my time and just systematically remove everything on the board until I blow the board up, play my Snoke and my Avenger, and then it's just good game. Like they're not able to do anything because they lack that ability to push damage as much as some of these other decks do. Now, of course, they play Lurking Phantom probably, like as Boba Yellow does. But you know, that's a one specific card, and I have answers for that card in this deck. I have Inferno 4, I have Black Sun Starfighter on purpose so that I can play at the same turn they play Phantom. Make an Opening. I have System Patrol Craft. I have Entrenched. So I have answers for the cards that are difficult to play against. Boba Yellow, you know, typically has a better control matchup because of the hand disruption that it plays, like with the Bazines, with the what's his name, the 3-drop. I can't think of his name right now. That when he plays him, he gets to discard a non-unit card from their hand. Body Rook. There you go. So they have that built in. They have Cunning, which also forces you to discard, and then they have the ability to be aggressive with Surprise Strike and Fet's Fire Spray. So they have a general better matchup. A Han Blue deck has a general better matchup because they have the hand disruption built in, and the ability to cheat units in and to fill up the board with 2 or 3 units after like a board wipe, for example. Decks that have built-in backup plans, like Cassian is a very good card against control. Reckless Gunslinger is a very good card against control. The Han Go Wide deck plays Reckless Gunslinger, which it absolutely should. And to me personally, if I was playing aggro, I know Sabine has a specific way of doing things and wants to have more hero units and all that. But Reckless Gunslinger is such a good card because if you play it, it does a damage. It's a 2/1. It's not like a huge threat, but it's still pushing 2 damage, which adds up quickly. It's like having a daring raid on the board constantly. And then, you know, if you resource it, you can smuggle it out later and do a damage. Same thing with Cassian. Cassian's an amazing card. Cassian, again, is in this deck as well, and that's why this deck here is just a very good deck against control. So if you're like, I just want to beat control, I don't care about anything else, then play a deck like this, because this deck is very, very difficult for control. So, you know, the next part is like, what cards are good against control? What are we bringing in? What are we even putting in the main board if we know that that's just, you know, a matchup that we want to have a better game 1 against? So, you know, the first thing that I always, you know, I revert back to or think about is just like the card Thoughtseize from Magic, or which is the equivalent of Spark or Rebellion in this game. And that's one of the reasons like Sabine Yellow, I think, started to do really well in set 1, because control started to amp up, and Spark of Rebellion is just such a good anti-control card. Because basically what you're doing is you're, especially like with Sabine Yellow, so like Sabine Yellow is one of those decks that I think could get better as if we see more control decks on the rise, as the meta has kind of started to shape, and the control decks have started to adjust on how to beat some of these meta decks in set 2. But I think a deck like Sabine Yellow with cards like Spark of Rebellion, you know, they're going wide, which is already one of control's weaknesses, and they're, you know, playing a lot of 2-power, 3-power units and going wide, so it makes it hard for control to, you know, deal with all of the threats. And then they're playing a card like Spark of Rebellion on a turn where they might play Overwhelming Barrage, or they might play a removal, and they're removing key cards from their hand and just saying like, how are you going to deal with me now? And you know, that's one of the best ways to deal with control, is just completely disrupt them. So a card like Bazine can potentially be very strong. Spark of Rebellion. Obviously, you've seen the rise in Han Blue and the Pillage decks and Force Throw. All those types of decks where they're putting pressure on control while simultaneously disrupting their hand and their game plan is very strong, and that's why Control has to play Dr. Pershing. Dr. Pershing is just amazing, and it is a way to counter those hand disruptive techniques and game plans. And that's, I think at this point, with Han Blue being so popular and just Pillage being a card that any red deck is trying to use for the most part right now, or at least in the sideboard, you have to play Dr. Pershing in those decks. So, but it's still affecting, the game flow if you're removing the cards from their hand. Obviously the Boba Blue version here has a better answers to decks like that because of Enticing Reward and Dr. Pershing. The next thing that I've talked about a lot is just going wide. Like, going wide is a lot of cheap units going wide, 2-3 power, putting pressure, hitting for 7-8 damage a turn. That adds up really quick. And if they don't have all the right answers, especially as your units get bigger, and especially if you play cards like K2SO or Poe or even Wrecker with Overwhelm, like, it can just really snowball out of control for a control deck. So that's another way, and that's the way that I'm going to show in the gameplay today. The next way that I think is cards that have reach. So I've talked about this a little bit, but that's like cards like Daring Raid, Chaos of War, For a Cause I Believe In, Migs Mayfield, Saw Gerrera, all those type of cards where they're getting damage straight to their face or straight to their base, whatever you want to call it. I still call it face for Magic, but straight to their base without having to have an actual unit on board or having to deal with sentinels or anything. You're just going straight to their face. And that's, again, I'm going to talk about that more in this video and throughout this video, but like, you want to always put pressure on the control player first with your units so that you have a steady flow of damage coming in at their base that they have to figure out a way to deal with. And then once you get to a certain point, you use the reach cards in your hand to get over the top or to finish them off, essentially. Especially if, like, as the game goes on, like, they start getting bigger units or bigger sentinels and things that are harder for you to deal with on the ground or in space or in the board. That's when the reach comes in and is like, well, I don't care about any of that because I've already done enough damage with going wide and putting pressure. Now I'm just going to finish you off with reach. So that's what I will be talking about throughout the video and trying to show you. And then another strategy is kind of goes alongside of like discard and hand disruption, but I would say mill cards. A deck like this, again, Boba Blue has restock, and the 3 Bounty Hunter crew, which, in my version, I think you could possibly bring in the restock for the confiscate in the main board, just because you do draw a lot of cards in this deck, and there's actually potential to mill yourself out in games that last longer. So you don't want to do that in game one. But milling a control deck is a good way to respond. Now, obviously, restock is an incredible card, and a lot of the control decks are already playing that. But if you mill their restocks, then they can't play them. I mean, they have to have the Bounty Hunter crew, but if milling is still really strong. Vigilance is an incredible card. Like, your opponent, especially in like Iden Blue, that's why Iden Blue is just so good against other control decks, is because you're playing Vigilance at 4 cost, and you're just milling 6 cards at 4 cost. Milling 6 cards in a 50-card deck is really strong, and that's why the mill strategy thing got so prevalent in set 1. But it really disrupts your game plan when you're 6 cards, and 2 of those cards are cards you were looking for in the discard pile. And if you don't have a restock to put them back, either way, there's not any cards right now that say, grab this card out of your hand, besides Bounty Hunter crew. Grab this card out of your discard pile and put it back in your hand. So that's why, the 3 Bounty Hunter crew in this particular list, but that still disrupts them. And 6 cards is a lot. So, I mean, that's a formidable strategy as well as a way to deal with control. I like to still play Vigilance, like 3 copies and sometimes 1 restock, even like in decks like Kira Green. I still like that as an option because I'm trying to put pressure on them, but they have a lot more just hard control cards. And I'm not Kira Green's not an aggressive deck. It's more of a soft control deck. So soft control decks a lot of times struggle with hard control because hard control is just completely focused on control, while soft control is like I can deal with these aggro decks and I can match up with them and I can deal with mid-range and I have some strong units and then I can play a little bit of control. It's kind of more of a balanced deck. So, you know, some of the things that are really good in a control mirror, the hard control deck is going to be have the edge, in my opinion. But I like to have vigilance in there as another answer so that I can kind of disrupt them a little bit as well. So, but yeah, that's just an idea of like certain cards that you're going to want to bring in. So like Pillage is just a great card if you're playing a red deck. You play it at 4 cost. It's a great card to just throw in your deck alongside cheap units or cheating units in like Han Blue does, or even the Han Go Wide deck. I mean, if I was playing that deck, I would consider playing Pillage potentially on the sideboard. Just, I don't know. I mean, I might prefer more things like Heroic Sacrifice just because that's a better answer where you still get to draw a card and keep putting pressure on the board. But Pillage is, you know, maybe not in the Han Go Wide deck, but you know, in a lot of decks that have red. Also decks like Vader, Green, and things like that. I'm even playing. What was the other deck? Oh, I'm even playing Pillage in my Iden Blue deck as an answer for hard control. I think it's at 6 cost. I think it's just more impactful than the Spark of Rebellion as a way to just disrupt their hand and force them to have a lower hand size unless they have a Dr. Pershing on board or whatever, you know, or Enticing Rewards or whatever. So. So in game 1 here, I'm going to show you how to beat Iden Blue. And typically what you want to do, and this deck right here, it doesn't have what I would call reach. And so this deck just has a bunch of units. It has what, 47 units? Is that correct? Yes, 47 units. So this deck is just pummeling the board with units. So every turn I'm just flooding the board with units. So this is like more similar to what an aggro deck in Magic would be, because it's just, I'm just flooding the board with units and just saying, here, try to deal with all this pressure, and good luck. And it's incredibly hard for control because it is coming from too many angles and it's too much pressure. And a lot of these units have 3 power. So you're getting hit with three powered units, and then you have an ambush coming in with a Poe or a Wrecker where they're overwhelming you and hitting you for 5 more damage. It's like you're taking 15 damage in a turn. That's just really, really hard for a control deck. As always, please like and subscribe, and make sure to comment on the 20 subscriber giveaway, as I will be giving out a Poe, a copy of Aggression, 3 red 3s and 3 K2SOs to 4 lucky winners. Just comment what decks you think are the best decks or could end up being the best deck from set 2, and make sure to subscribe so you have a chance to win one of those prizes. But I greatly appreciate all of the support for a control deck. So let's get into this game against Iden Blue and kind of see how this game goes and how to beat Iden Blue. All right, up against Iden Blue here, which I would say is, you know, between this and Boba Blue is like the premier control deck in the format right now. Would we like to mulligan? No. Probably let IG3 go. And I'm gonna let Poe go just because I want to be able to play Gunslinger and R2D2. Looks like they're playing a similar version to the video I just posted. This deck is sweet, I really like it. Okay, we can play this for 1. Give it grit. Or just play Wing Leader, or play K2SO. I don't want to get rid of our K2SOs. They're going to be really important in beating them. This is a really strong card to play too. But yeah, it's just kind of awkward right now. First thing we're going to do is attack him with Gunslinger. While they do that, yeah. Then we're going to Wing Leader the R2-D2. Okay. That's exactly why I did that. Dr. Pershing is actually very, very good. And because it's so good, I'm going to damage it so they can't keep getting card advantage. Okay, Heroic Sacrifice is actually great for our K2SO. So if he does the thing with Pershing here, he loses it, so he won't keep getting that advantage. We're gonna go face. You can actually wait. Let's undo that. Let's actually just kill the Pershing, so he can't keep getting card advantage, because he was just gonna put the damage on Pike. Okay, he's gonna kill K2SO here, which is fine. Choose a card to resource. I guess Gunslinger, we can pull that out later. Pike kills K2SO. So 3 damage. Go face. This is where that Poe would come in handy. No, he can have the 3 cards. Boy. Okay, there's a good card. I think I want to keep all the red cards. Okay, kills K2SO again. Then we're going to go face. Don't want that. Trying to get all of our damage in. Okay, there's a card. Just get rid of Pike here, yeah. We want to kill the Long Pike with Wrecker. Okay, getting in for 2 more. Alright, there's Iden. So we're going to ECL Wrecker. We're going to destroy Battlefield Marine. Kill Iden. Get it for 22. Okay, he could have a takedown here with a hand full of 7 cards. Either way, we have game on board next turn. Okay, gain 2 life with that. Okay. Alright, double heroic sacrifice is pretty sweet here. I'm just gonna keep my hand. So we need to get 10 damage. Okay. Go ahead and heroic sacrifice Han. If he doesn't have a way to kill R2, then we will heroic sacrifice R2. The reason that I did that first is so that Long Pike couldn't just kill Han. And might as well just get value out of it instead of just trying to cheat in an extra unit. He's played 3 making openings now? Okay. So again, he's trying to kill our R2-D2 with the Long Pike. And I would have taken out Long Pike, but Iden was the better thing to take out. So do we just heroic sacrifice our R2-D2 here? For 3. Get in. Because he's going to kill it anyway, so we might as well get value out of it. Yeah, that's a good card. Okay. Try to arena dodge him a little bit here. Okay. If he has a board wipe in hand, it doesn't make sense to use it at this point. Snoke is probably the worst thing he could have. Okay, that's a card. Play Maz Kanata, use it as bait for Long Pike. You notice I haven't really cheated out too many things this game. And honestly, that's just because it's been kind of awkward. Gonna resource Cassian here. Another vigilance. We're gonna timely wrecker here. And get rid of the echo. Get in for 6. I'm sorry, why did I die? Why would Wrecker die here? That doesn't make sense at all. Oh, because of first light, okay. So never mind, wait, let's look at that again, okay. That's what happened. I was like, what? It's better. Do get it for more damage, but losing the wrecker is not. Okay, cool. Okay. Real attack pod's good. Should I keep this whole hand? Sure. Fighters is a good card. Sure. Alright, we're getting close to an Avenger type turn here. Just really need to close things out. We have Reckless Gunslinger, Attack Pod. K2SO is really good. So we're going to attack him with fighters. Get to 26. We're going to play K2SO. Get to 27. And then K2SO dies. And we have game. Or we have the Reckless Gunslinger in our resources, potentially. Alright. Deal 7 damage to a unit. Do you want your opponent to deal 7 damage to fighters for freedom? Sure. Then we will play Gunslinger. On the initiative. They're running out of cards in their hand. Okay. Okay, double entrenched. Nice. Interesting. Can cheat in red 3 here. K2SO has Overwhelm. So I think Overwhelm still works with Entrenched. I'm pretty sure. Yep. Good game. Alright, so this next game is going to be against Boba Blue, and here we're going to be using the premier aggro deck in the format. My list is a little bit different than the list that I had spoke about recently on the top meta decks, where I put in Heroic Sacrifice in the main board. I just really like that card. I think it's an amazing card, because one of the things that we don't think about sometimes when you're thinking about Heroic Sacrifice is that you get to draw a card and then attack with a unit and give that unit plus 2/0. So you're getting to draw a card, pump up a K2SO to 6, and then it dies and does 3 more. So for 1 resource, you're drawing a card and doing 9 damage with a K2SO. If I were to play this deck, I would probably even consider playing the 3rd Heroic Sacrifice on the main board, just because it's such an impactful card at pushing damage. So up against Boba Blue, we're going to be, showing how a deck like this, which is a very popular deck, obviously it's one, the deck in the format that's basically format defining, and everyone has to play around this deck or figure out how to have a plan for this deck. We're going to be playing against a control deck, which, the recent videos I did on control, I beat Sabine. Once I had to adjust my list because it was hard, but once I adjusted my list to beat this deck regularly, which is the deck that I expect to see most of in a tournament, for multiple reasons. Again, and the reasons are that it's an aggro deck, so it's one of the easier decks to play and pilot. 2, it's one of the cheaper decks compared to some of these other decks, and a lot of these cards people have access to. And then 3, it's just like one of the, it's a great deck. It's one of the best decks in the format, and it has good matchups across the board, and you just have to, the stronger the player, that's what I love about this game, is that it's more about the player and less about the deck. So, but basically, the plan going into this game is going to be to use my units early to establish a board presence with my units where I have consistent damage coming into my opponent each turn, and then once I get to a place where I'm close enough to finishing them off, I'm going to use things like K2SO, For a Cause I Believe in, Heroic Sacrifice, and Rebel Assault to push that final damage to get in over the top. So let's get into this game against Boba Blue. And, as we're going into each of these games, like if you have questions in the comments about different things, or maybe how the game went wasn't exactly the types of things that I talked about, that's because I'm reacting to what is presented in front of me as an aggro player. And as an aggro player in this situation, I want to pace myself. I don't want to overcommit. I want to pace myself so that I'm, like I said, 9 out of 10 times I'm going to be attacking with the units that are on board first before they die, and then basically filling up the board with more ammunition after those units die. If those units don't die, then that's even better, because then the ammunition that I have just increases for the following turn. This is why I think cards like Bombing Run are probably going to get played more in the near future, because they are more effective at dealing with things in the current meta, especially with the Han wide deck being a deck that's going to be played a lot more. So, but let's get into this game against Boba Blue and see how to beat a deck like Boba Blue. Alright, we're up against Boba Blue. I'm not sure if this is the version I just posted today, or if this is a different version, but we're here trying to showcase how to beat control. I'm trying to see if we don't have a turn 1 play, so we're going to mulligan. I think that's, oof. Man, it's kind of rough. It's rough stuff, dude, to not even get anything for turn 1. I think we can let Wing Leader go. Heroic Sacrifice is actually pretty useful just later on in the game as a closer. So, yeah, I mean, might as well deal damage. Okay. So this is a... Alright, we'll get a casting down, most likely. Oh, there's a 2-drop. Thanks, Battlefield Marine. Darksaber is pretty strong. They're gonna need to have an entrenched to stop us that turn. I mean, K2SO is really good against control. I think we're just going to be mana efficient here. Just if they have an answer, they have an answer. Not sure what answer they would have at 3 resources. Power of the Dark Side, I guess, is the only thing I could think of. Okay. Deal damage. Yep, of course they had it. It's nice when you have it all. Don't need that. K2SO is going to be really important. So we will deal damage. Deploy. See what they do. If they have a takedown, they have a takedown. If not, we play K2SO. If they do, play K2SO. Okay. So There's an argument here, since they already put 4 damage on us, that we just play K2SO, get in for 5, and then swing in with Sabine. Yeah, I think, again, I'm not like a Sabine expert. I typically do not play this deck, just for many reasons that are I've talked about before. But Wing Leader isn't bad. I don't think we need 2 Darksaber here. I like the idea of playing Darksaber plus Heroic Sacrifice here, potentially. If they kill K2SO immediately, then we'll play a second one, probably. We'll see what they do, though. Okay, they're probably going to kill it, yeah. So we're going to just deal 3 damage. Keep pushing damage as much as possible. They still have 5 resources. Okay, Boba's out. This is tough. I really don't want K2SO to die immediately. We put 2 things on Sabine, that doesn't do a whole lot here. We put the Darksaber on Sabine, that doesn't do a whole lot either. Yeah. Yeah, just kind of, I guess K2SO is our best play. We have Wrecker coming in next turn. This card is amazing. So we'll just claim the initiative here. Okay, interesting. He has takedown or something, I don't know. Could still have takedown. Yep. So our opponent has had just about everything they need. So this is awesome, what we're about to do here. Second Wrecker seems okay. I'm gonna let go of the Wing Leader, I think. I think that's a card that's just awkward right now. Alright, we're gonna ECL Wrecker. Do its 1 plate ability. We'll let go of this. Do 5 there. Trigger ambush. Get in for 6. Bada bing, bada boom. Cloud Rider will kill us if he has a Cloud Rider. Oh no, he discarded it with Greedo's ability. Okay. Darksaber is like decent against them. We're just going to claim the initiative. There's no point in us pinging for damage. I'd much rather get in for 7. I mean, they could have another answer again. At 5, they could have a Vanquish. They could have a takedown here. Power the dark side even. Ideally, next turn we draw into like 2 cheap units so we can go a little wider. But we'll see what happens. Okay, Long Pike is a thing. Poe is not bad. For a Cause is not bad here either. Darksaber does what for us? It makes us an 11-9, which is pretty sweet. They'd have to have a Rival's Fall, which is the risk that we take, is that they drew into that. Heroic Sacrifice is actually just game, isn't it? So it doesn't matter about any of this stuff. So we have Heroic Sacrifice. So there you go. And that's why I have Heroic Sacrifice main board. It's an amazing card. I'd like to have 3, personally. But yeah, I mean, so you know, you're just pushing damage. I didn't even play the Dark Saber because it didn't make sense, because playing it would risk getting a removal. So, you know, it's a, you know, Boba Blue, I think Boba Blue is good. I personally, you know, my list is a little different than theirs, and I adjusted it for this matchup because I think Sabine is the deck that you have to be able to beat if you're playing a deck like Boba Blue, because you're going to see a lot of it. My list is a little different. Plays Dr. Pershing, which I think is the MVP actually, and I don't know if he played Dr. Pershing. I didn't see any in his list. It doesn't look like it though. It looks like he's playing more of the Lompike Tobias list, which is cool, but I found like those cards are just too slow for Sabine, and I just needed to have ways to gain life and ways to, you know, draw cards and draw into the removal that I needed to get card advantage to survive the early game, you know, to find my vigilances, especially because vigilance costs 6 costs, and then find my top targets and my clients and, you know, specific removals. So, you know, it's just a tough matchup, but basically I'm just, you know, continuing to push pressure until I'm at a state where it makes sense to just heroic sacrifice her for a cause. Okay, so for the last deck that we're going to be playing against today that it has a control element to it, we're going to be playing against Han Blue, which is a deck that has recently been all over the place, that has a, you know, hand disruption, life gain element alongside the ability to cheat units out. It's one of the strongest decks in the format currently, and, you know, for good reason. So we're going to be playing against it with Kylo Aggression. So this is just another form of an aggressive deck that I'm going to show you how to play against control. So with this deck, what this deck aims to do is just go incredibly wide, similar to Han Go Wide deck, and just push damage. And then we're using, in this deck, we have more reach. So we have a little bit of hand disruption with Force Throw. Then we have the ability to pump up our units with Kylo's ability, which against control is not going to be something that we are going to use as much, again, because we want to just attack him with the units first before they die. So I'm not sure how much I'll use that. Then once we get to a place where the damage is close enough, if our board state's really wide, we might use a Rallying the Cry to pump up all of our cheap units to +2/0 to close the game out, or we might just use like Chaos of War, which is a great card against control because our hand size is typically 1 or basically 2 cards or less, and then their hand size is often 4 or 5 cards or more. And then we're going to use that and Daring Raid, as well as Migs Mayfield as a form of reach. And again, reach is the ability to put damage on their face without, basically we're reaching over the units that they have on the board, we're reaching over their sentinels and hitting them in the face for damage just with hands straight, a card straight from our hand. So kind of show you how, and I would, you know, I would imagine that this deck, even more so than Sabine and Han Go Wide, is probably the better of the 3 of these aggro decks at beating control. And from my experience in the video I did on this, I mean, I didn't play against control in every matchup, but this deck just really pushes damage really fast. Like, you can win this with this deck on, I think, as early as turn 3 if you have, you know, the nuts draw. But typically you're winning on like turn 4, which is like a, you know, a turn after Kylo has flipped. You're just basically getting over the 25 to 30 damage threshold on your 4th turn or the 5 resource turn. And usually at 5 resources in this deck, you're not resourcing anymore because everything is very cheap. So you're just really able to continue to flood the board and try to win by the 5 resource turn. So I would imagine that this will probably be the most dominant, but I could be wrong. And then we even have Saw Gerrera in the sideboard as a way to deal with control as well, which is, its ability does 2 damage to their face every time they play an event, I believe. Each opponent plays an event, they deal 2 damage to their base. Yeah. Yep, that's an additional cost. So, but yeah, let's get into this one against Han Blue and see how this deck does and how to beat that type of control. Okay, in match 3 here, we're going to be using Kylo Red, which is another very aggressive deck, and we're playing against a different kind of control deck, which is a hand disruption, life gain, cheating powerful units deck with the Han Blue deck, which is one of the you know, top decks in the format currently. So turn 1, we can play Wolf, Kylo Silencer, into a 5th Brother. No, I mean, all of our hands are going to be playable. Like, we play so low to the ground on this deck. Mulligan, so we're going to let go of a 5th Brother and probably a Gunship. Start off with the Kylo Silencer. I think Wolf is going to be useful for sure, but not. Kind of want to benefit off of it on its one-plate ability as well. There's a good chance our opponent has like a green A-Wing or something here, if they're playing the more typical version, where they try to use like Carabas and stuff. Fallen Lightsaber is a great draw. Rallying Cry is a good draw too. I'm not sure how relevant it's going to be in this matchup, but I don't want to just let go of it. Daring Raid is going to be relevant too because of the ability to play it. So what I'm trying to figure out right now is what card to get rid of so that next turn I can have just about an empty hand and play a Fallen Lightsaber plus a Daring Raid. So it's going to have to be this, unfortunately. So we get down to basically one card. The other thing is, because I know they have removal, I'm not going to be using the discard ability as much as I would ideally like to. Like, I'm going to be more focused on just attacking in for damage to push damage on their base. Yeah, and that's why Daring Raid could be useful. So we're going... Well, now that they played that, what are my choices here? Kind of makes sense to play the Wolf and discard this, but I really don't want to discard any of these cards. They're all very good. Play 5th Brother, he's just going to trade with it. Wolf is almost better, but I want to play Lightsaber next turn. So I could play Wolf and Daring Raid this turn, and just kind of go from there. Yeah, Wolf also trades favorably with Kanan. It's weird, but I think that's the route I want to go. Okay, this is an easy choice here. Having the Fallen Lightsaber for Kylo is one of the best things you can do in this deck, if it's able to survive, because a lot of times they're going to have Takedown, which is one of the worst cards that Kylo has to deal with, of course. If he trades with Wolf, that's totally fine. See what our opponent does here, though. He's playing a Force Throw to kill one of our units. Choose a card to discard. Okay, we'll do the one that's 1. And we'll put 1 damage on... Yeah, okay, I guess he chose. We can attack into that. He can't gain life now, though. So we're just going to go face. We're not worried about Kanan. He can't gain life because of Wolf's ability. Okay, always go damage first when you're playing against any kind of control deck. Most of the time. Like 9 out of 10 times I would say you always attack first before you play cards. Okay, he's cheating something in. I'm guessing a K2SO. Yeah, that's why Daring Raid would be useful. We're just going to deploy, play Fallen Lightsaber, and swing in for 7, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll let go of the gunship here, I think. Again, if they have another force throw, we'll let go Daring Raid. He's at 5 resources. He could play Obi-Wan here. Or that. Okay. Interesting choice. I think that was very interesting. Attacking with Kylo first is not a problem for us. We just want to get in for damage. We're going to go TIE Silencer and Daring Raid here. Again, if you looked at my recent version is more of a control deck, and it's built for the ability to push damage on my opponents. So we are in pretty good shape here. They're up to 29 damage. We'll play Fifth Brother and Kylo Silencer. Hopefully. Unless they have another Force Throw. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, they have to have some kind of life gain here. Like a Vigilance is their best bet on the Kylo TIE Silencer. If they play that main board, otherwise we are in good shape. Good game. Yeah, looks like our opponent has seen the light. So again, we're just pushing damage, pushing damage, pushing damage. We're using our cards that have reach and things like that, like Daring Raid and Chaos of War, which we didn't draw, which would have been a really good card this game. We're saving those for the end. I did use one Daring Raid early just because it was kind of awkward and I wanted to have the ability to trade with Kanan. I think our opponent made a misplay or two, but maybe I don't know what his hand was, so it's hard to say. But again, to be control, you just have to remember that you're kind of running the show, right? They're trying to survive. You're pushing damage. You're playing cheap units. You're going wide. You're using ECL. You know, you have Overwhelm. You have K2SO, things like that when you're playing an aggro deck. You really like each of these decks that I've just played against today. I have played them all extensively. I'm more of a control player. So again, my lists are more optimally built to beat aggro because I think aggro is the hardest matchup for control, because especially the way this game is, like, it's not like other games I played where, you know, aggro runs out of gas. Like, you don't run out of gas. You keep finding gas in this game because you're drawing 2 cards every turn, and at a certain point you don't need to resource when you're playing an aggro deck like Kylo. Like, at 5 resources, I don't need to resource anything anymore. Every card in this deck minus aggression is less than 4 resources. So at 5 resources, I'm good. So I'm just looking for like Chaos of War, Daring Raids, Fallen Lightsaber on my Fifth Brother here would be a great card. I'm just looking for ways to push damage. Now my Han Blue deck, I think, would still have a tough time with Kylo Red because of how wide it goes, and there's no board wipes in Han Blue. But in general, I have more of a control build where I have more removal and a little less reliant on my units, which is just my style of play. But once I switched to that in my Han Blue version, like, the deck performed a lot better against aggro, and I started beating aggro with no problem. So, you know, the best way to know how to beat a deck like Han Blue is to play Han Blue yourself, because then you learn what its weaknesses are because you've played enough games with it, and you're like, okay, so Han Blue has a really tough time against decks like Kylo Red, Sabine Green if I don't hit the right removals early on, or if I don't have things to deal with their Dark Saber unit or their Dark Saber. You know, with the deck, you know, we'll talk more about the other decks, but this particular matchup, they have a decent amount of removal, but it's not like heavy removal. They're more reliant on their units, but you're the aggressor, you know. And if you're playing an aggro deck, you know, especially like Kylo, the best thing you can find is a Fallen Lightsaber on Kylo, because that makes it incredibly difficult to kill that card, and you're getting in for 6, 7, 8 damage. And if you notice that after they attacked in, I didn't care about my hand size. I just wanted to get in for 6 damage because they were trying to put me in a position where it wasn't as optimal to attack in with Kylo and get as much damage in because my hand size was bigger. But I don't care about that. I just care about getting damage to their face. And decks like this, like Kylo Red, which I still think is a very strong deck. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of it. I think it does, you know, it does struggle in the mid to late game. But if you're playing this deck a lot, I think I can't remember exactly, but I think Kylo Red is the one deck I have right now in Carabas that's like undefeated. Like I think it's like I think it's like 13-0 or something. Um, but it's just because it's just so hard. You're going space, you're going ground, you're going wide. You have Fallen Lightsaber, you have Reach. Kylo's ability is strong. Again, I didn't use Kylo's ability in this matchup. Again, I don't care about that action because it prevents me from attacking. And if I wait to attack, then they have the ability to remove something, which means I don't get to put damage on it before it dies. Put damage on their face before that unit dies. So you have to really just, I'll attack, so what, I don't get in for the extra 2 damage, or with Kylo's ability, or with Kylo the unit because I have a hand size. It doesn't matter, as long as I'm getting damage to their face first. And that's why I kind of put them in a position where, and this is why Kylo wins these games. I was going to win, 32-3? I mean, that's how, the first time I played this deck, and I've adjusted this list a little bit with Force Throws in here myself because it's just a really nice card. But that's how these games go. Like, Kylo just runs decks over. And then if it is not able to run them over because they have too many Sentinels or too much life gain, which is, where a deck like Iden Blue is a little harder, then Kylo eventually gets to a place where Iden Blue takes over. But that's like, that's if Kylo hasn't won by like turn 6. Once you get to like turn 6 and the Iden flip turn, then Iden can really start turning the game in their favor quickly, as they have enough resources to do multiple things in a turn, and top targets and clients, and Iden the leader, and all that stuff. So, but I hope that was helpful in my explanation of this particular matchup. Again, against Han Blue, though, we're just trying to win before they get to Luke Skywalker. Because once they get to Luke Skywalker, how are we going to answer that? With a 5th brother? Unless we have a Fallen Lightsaber, the card's not doing anything. Fallen Lightsaber makes us a 5/7, which, we could survive 1 hit from Luke, but they're still gaining 3 life. So, we don't want them to be able to play Luke. Like, this is the turn where they want to have Luke, and they could have played Luke and killed the Silencer, but because we had 2 units on board, we just attack him with the other one. So, it's too little too late, unfortunately. And if one of these 2 cards down here was a... well, actually, this card does have Reach, because essentially what I would do this turn is I would play Makes Mayfield, and then I would use Kylo Ren's ability, and then I would do 2 damage to their base. So that's basically like another form of Reach with Makes Mayfield, just to hit their face, which is why there's 3 of this card in the deck. And again, Reach means I'm able to put damage on their base without having to attack. So cards that just go straight from my hand, that reach over my opponent's board and go straight. So to kind of wrap up the video for today, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little different. I tried to be systematic with how I spoke about things and explain things, but I'm sure I missed something. And if you have questions about specific decks, feel free to ask, and I'll do the best of my ability to explain to you how to win, and your best bet against a control deck. There are definitely decks though that they just have bad matchups against control. And if that's a deck that you're really you're like, I'm going to be playing against several people that have that deck, that play that deck every week at locals, and it's just really hard to beat, then I would say, you know what, this deck that I'm playing right now that has a really bad matchup against control, I just think that maybe it's a deck I put on the shelf for right now. And maybe I play this other deck that I like that has a better matchup. But, I do think one of the best things about this game is that we all, you have the ability to sideboard, which I just saw something recently where people were talking about they wish that sideboarding didn't exist, and I totally disagree with that. If sideboarding didn't exist, it would really just be about luck of the draw and what you get matched up against. And I got matched up against control all day and I just lost every game. That would be awful. But the fact that you have sideboard cards, so you can build your sideboard with what your deck's weakness is. So if you feel like your deck is weak to control, then play hand disruption, or play cheaper units, or play more space units, or play more reach. That's all kind of things that you can do to increase your odds of beating a control deck. But again, still the best thing you can do though is to play some of these control decks yourself. You might actually like them, but if you don't, at least you'll know you'll have a better understanding of how to beat them as you experience your own losses with that deck and how people beat you, and plays that they do, and lines of play, and cards that were really hard to deal with. And then you'll be like, oh, I could put that card in my deck, and I could do that line of play when I'm in that situation against control. And oh, I want to make sure against Iden Blue that I win before turn 6, so that, even if Iden flips, that I'm still just, gonna win the game, and there's nothing they could do about it at that point. So, having a plan, understanding the decks that you're going to be playing against, the control decks that are hard to play against. And, obviously I didn't get to cover every deck and how to beat control. That would take days to do. And I don't have days to sit here and record. And I don't think you have days to watch me record. But please just feel free to ask, and I'll try to explain to the best of my ability. And again, if you like content like this, that's more like specific about how to beat things, or just, seeing different decks perform and all that kind of stuff, just let me know. And again, I will also be doing some Twin Suns content, just some theory crafting with the 80 cards. I'm not going to mess with the 50 card stuff because there's just too many good cards for me to even try to fit them all into a 50 card deck right now with Twin Suns. But I'll be doing some more of those periodically because I just think it's really fun to theory craft, and I love building decks like that. They're just a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun ways to play a game. Like, what I loved about Magic was Commander, and I think most people did, just because it was so much fun to just build a deck where you have 100 cards of one of each card and try to come up with different ways of different ideas and different combos and all that kind of stuff. But as always, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and y'all have a good one, and peace out.